Welcome to the Mind Tricks Radio Distortion of the Day. This is where I explain and discuss in under 10 minutes basic concepts in clinical psychology that I hope you will find practical and useful in your life. Thanks for tuning in. Hey there, Mind Tricks Radio fans. I'm Dr. Aaron Kaplan, clinical psychologist, and today I'm talking about a really gloomy cognitive distortion that feels like a wet blanket over a campfire. It's the pessimistic bias, and it's no fun at all. I hope you enjoy this episode, but you probably won't. Ever had one of those days where you wake up convinced the universe just isn't on your side? You stub your toe. That 10K I've been training for next weekend just isn't going to happen. Your coffee spills. Well, this is the start of a lousy day where everything's going to go wrong. You get a work-related email and decide, I'm getting fired for sure. Pessimistic bias is our tendency to overestimate negative outcomes and assume that things will turn out worse than they actually will. It's like having a lawyer named Murphy in your head, you know, Murphy's Law, who constantly tells you whatever can go wrong will. Now, you might be asking yourself, why are humans cursed with a pessimistic bias in the first place? Well, from an evolutionary standpoint, it makes some sense. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors had to anticipate danger to survive. Wild animals, warring tribes, and no modern medicine. Life was brutal. If you weren't constantly looking over your shoulder, you might not live to see tomorrow. That survival instinct stuck with us, even though our modern-day threats now look more like spilled coffee and unread emails. In other words, our primitive ancestors needed a healthy dose of anticipatory anxiety to cope with life-threatening challenges. That hardwired survival instinct, which has evolved in our brains, translates to the pessimistic bias found in modern humans, even though the day-to-day threats that we now face are nowhere near what our cave-dwelling ancestors experienced. So let's take a look at some examples of pessimistic bias and how it might influence the way a person approaches decision-making. Paul is really dissatisfied with his job and has been for a few years. He has an entrepreneurial idea in his industry that might make a really good business opportunity, but he's almost certain the business venture will fail. Everyone knows 90% of all businesses fail the first year, right? Even though he has the support of his wife and some savings to get him by, the chance of failure feels too great. He worries he could get sued, he could lose money, he could get nasty Yelp reviews, and if he fails, he'd have to hang his head in shame. It's not worth the risk since so many things could go wrong. In talking with her friends, Julie realized she's been playing it extremely conservatively with her investments. Her friends have encouraged her to consider being a bit more aggressive, giving herself and her net worth a greater chance to grow in the years to come. But she knows as soon as she invests in anything, even slightly risky, with her luck the investment will just tank and she'll lose. Better play it safe than sorry. Daniel's been thinking of taking an improv acting class, and he's always wanted to be an actor. But every time a new acting course is announced, he psychs himself out. What's the point of developing acting skills? Everyone knows it's impossible to become a well-known actor, a celebrity for example, and he reasons that he probably won't be good at it anyway. When he thinks about the time, money, and effort it takes to take the class, it's pretty clear. It's unrealistic and a waste of resources. Easier to watch Seinfeld reruns in the comfort of his own home than try to be the next sitcom star. You see, these are all examples of pessimistic bias, an assumption that things just aren't going to work out because they usually don't. And if something bad is going to happen to someone, it's probably going to be me. But of course, things don't always go wrong. Sometimes they go right. If they didn't, no one would succeed at anything, and we'd probably all still be living in caves. Is it possible that an individual person can be so cursed that only bad things happen to them? No, that's simply not rational. Unless you live in an occult world where you believe life-ruining curses actually happen, in which case you should probably be listening to a podcast about witchcraft and not about psychology. Okay, so back to our examples. Paul is afraid of taking a risk of starting a business. Why wouldn't it fail if 90% of all businesses fail? Well, actually, no. That's one of those scary statistics people love to throw around. The real number is closer to 20%. And even if some fail, plenty succeed. But Paul's pessimistic bias has him focusing on only the worst-case scenarios, ignoring the possibility that things might actually work out. And anyway, using a blanket statistic doesn't take into account the nuances of different business ventures. Does an 8-year-old's lemonade stand have the same chance of failing as someone trying to sell real estate on Venus? They're both businesses, but clearly the definition of success and failure and the plausibility of generating income is vastly different. Will Paul be sued by someone? It's certainly possible, but generally speaking, statistically unlikely. Furthermore, most businesses have insurance policies to protect them in this rare event. And also, a business owner can take steps to mitigate the risk of a lawsuit if they run their business in a mindful and organized manner. Bad Yelp reviews? Maybe it happens. It seems that nowadays, in social media, everyone fancies themselves a bona fide critic. Well, everyone? Of course not. If Paul provides the best service he can, he's likely to get more good reviews than bad, especially if he encourages satisfied customers to leave positive feedback. And what about the loss of time and money? Well, you can't really lose time. You can spend time, and it's up to you whether you decide that time was a loss or a valuable experience, regardless of the outcome. And while I wouldn't suggest throwing money away carelessly, spending money to make money is a calculated risk in business, and a well-prepared entrepreneur can take steps to mitigate those risks. Finally, the fear of hanging his head in shame if he fails. Well, if we saw all failures as shameful, we'd never take risks. I would prefer to think that most people would be more impressed by the courage to take a risk than by the fear of never taking a risk at all. So Paul has a choice. He can dismiss his dream of owning his own business as an unrealistic farce and stay in his unfulfilling job indefinitely, or he can examine his pessimistic bias and decide whether his fears are truly based on reason, data, and evidence. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Dr. K, bad things can and do happen. I can't afford to be a Pollyanna in life. Isn't having an optimistic bias just as bad because I might not be prepared for bad things to happen? To be clear, I'm not saying bad things never happen, or that you should be completely unprepared for unexpected negative outcomes. But expecting them as the rule rather than the exception creates a few unfortunate realities. First, pessimistic bias fuels anxiety, and chronic anxiety isn't exactly great for your mind and body. Second, it keeps you stuck. No risks, no growth, no new opportunities. And third, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you assume things will go wrong, you'll make decisions that ensure that they do. And that's no way to live. Thanks for listening to this week's Distortion of the Day. I'm Dr. Aaron Kaplan, and I wish you the best in cognitive clarity. Thank you for listening to Mind Tricks Radio. I hope you have enjoyed the program. For more information about Mind Tricks, you can go to my website, www.waikikihealth.com. Be sure to subscribe to Mind Tricks on your preferred podcasting host to be notified of new episodes of Mind Tricks. Please take some time to give Mind Tricks a good rating and review wherever you are listening. It really helps get the word out to new listeners. And please like and share Mind Tricks posts on Twitter and Facebook by following your host, Dr. Aaron Kaplan.